Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Reverend Gary Manning. I'm the pastor of Boynton Street Church of God here in the city of Meadville, and I would like to welcome everyone to tonight's concert. We hope that you can sit back and enjoy yourself by listening to a man share his faith through music. This was put together under the umbrella of two organizations called Peace for Crawford and Courageous Conversation. These organizations would like to get a word out that we can live in unity and become a peaceful community by working together. I would like to take a moment to thank all who worked hard to put this concert together. Can we give them a hand of applause, because they really worked hard. Yes, they did. Amen. To put this concert together. Dr. Alec Chien was born in Hong Kong. He earned his bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degree at Juilliard School, where he studied under Adélie Marcus. Dr. Chien has performed in solo recitals, chamber music, and concertos on 4 continents, in countries such as Australia, Austria, China, Greece, Hong Kong, and others. He has been a concerto soloist for the Philadelphia Orchestra, Pittsburgh Symphony, Buffalo Philharmonic, and others. In chamber music, Dr. Chien has collaborated with Alexander String Quartet, Ariel Woodwinds Quintet, members of the Philadelphia Orchestra, and the New York Philharmonic. Dr. Chien has previously served as an artist in residence, professor of music, and chair of the music department at Allegheny College. He has taught humanities and music courses while providing instruction to piano students. He performs periodic concerts at Allegheny College and performs with the Erie Philharmonic Orchestra. Now retired, Dr. Chien frequently teaches at Carnegie Mellon University and serves as the chair of a local nonprofit organization of the Meadville Neighborhood Center. I would like you to join me as we welcome Dr. Chien as he shares his musical journey of adversity, faith, and resilience. I now present to you Dr. Alec Chien.
thank you very much. I hope I can handle this mic a little bit better. Thank you, really, thank you for coming. Thank you for being you. Looking at the support here, it's very difficult to dismiss the power of a community when it collaborates. And it certainly is very humbling indeed. This is actually Pastor Manning's brainchild, so we have him to blame. He always says, we're all hurting. And he's right. And so he one day said, wouldn't it be neat to have an event, and it doesn't have to be music, although he did mention music, have an event where it brings people together and to at least initiate the spreading of the vision that plants the seed and nurture the soil for meaningful relationships. And so knowing that sometimes I do play and talk about music and sometimes about my life, this concert didn't take long to come to fruition. So tonight it really is about my life, my journey. And sometimes if you see me referring to notes, it's because I have given this a long thought, and there's quite a lot for me to share with you. So this is a good way to keep me reminded. As soon as this became something that's in the books to be planned and spread and to notify people, one thing immediately happened with me, and it's doubt. I immediately began to doubt, because I really asked myself, why would people want to come hear about my life story? This is not a false humility. I really didn't think it is something that is so, something that so many people would want to do. It also, knowing about my Meadville, I don't know how many of you know about my Meadville. If you don't, look it up online. It is a very wonderful thing that has happened about 3 years now. They collect stories from individuals in this community, put them together and see what it is that people's hearts are. And so they have a great deal of data. So knowing about that work actually didn't help my doubt. Because I said, okay, that's wonderful, then why is this particular story being highlighted? Why is this story being promoted, so to speak? Now, I also have a mantra that I live by, and that is, you know how sometimes people use the word, oh, society is like that, or the community seems to want that. And very often, I get the sense that when I use that word myself, it's a good place to blame. Society's fault, not mine, you know. But my mantra is, guess what? You are the community. You are part of it. And so it is really coming back to myself. So knowing that, my own mantra, that this is, I'm part of the community, so why not share? It still didn't help my doubt, because it never did answer, why is this being spotlighted? Okay, I'll put a pause on that doubt. There's another thing I want to share with you about myself, and that is, in general, I have a hard time expressing my feelings. Okay? Yeah, I have a hard time expressing my feelings. Often, it begins with not being able to even identify my own feelings, let alone expressing them. And so with that, this is like, wow, I'm doubting, and I have a hard time expressing myself. So I asked myself, self, why are you doing this? But that was back in October, and I said, I have time. Well, guess what? It's now. Maybe by the end of the day, there's a little hope about the doubt. But 2 days ago, I came across this thought, and I want to share it with you. And if you guys would promise that you would do this, it just might help. And that is that you get a message tonight, remember it, share it with others, promote it, protect it, and project it. Because if you're able to do that and promise me to do that and put it in the forefront of your mind, that will make me feel much better about doing this. By the way, did you notice I just expressed my own feeling? I'm getting better, even as we speak. So you might say, well, for heaven's sake, tell us what the message is. Well, the message is this: relationship. Okay, relationship. Actually, that's just one word. It's not a message yet. The word relationship. Because we all long to belong. We all long to be heard. And we all long to be valued. And I'm convinced that relationships can begin to nurture that listening heart of ours. Because with that, it will pave the way towards being able to make sure that we have relationships going on. Relationships will pave the way towards resilience. It just will. So as I speak tonight, you will see samples of that. Notice I did say a listening heart. That too will come back a little later on. Speaking of heart, I was born with a hole in my heart, physically. So the technical term for that is tetralogy of Fallot. Tetralogy means four, tetra. And Dr. Arthur Fallot, a French cardiologist, quite a few years back in the maybe early 1900s, he discovered that babies who were born with a hole in their heart tend to have four things wrong with them. Okay? And I know you know I have many more than four things wrong with me. But I'm talking about the heart and the medical situation. Guess what? I only have 3 out of those 4. I don't remember what the other 2 were. I know that I had a hole in my heart. Well, when I was born that way, our family doctor in Hong Kong said to my parents, the only solution is open heart surgery. And don't do it. Not yet. Because it's still very risky. In those days, it was very risky. He said, just hang on tight. The medicine and science continue to improve. And I'm pretty sure that it will become very reliable. So that's not really that helpful. It's a prediction, speculation. And so during my early years, obviously, I was quite pampered. And I'm very grateful for my parents that did that. I hardly did anything physically active. I was sick a lot. And I don't know if I see too many young people here. You can go home and tell them. 3 out of 5 weeks, I stayed home from school because of illness. Sometimes even because schoolmates were sick, they held me back. And so during those years, very telling years, I had a lot of time to be home alone. I have 2 older sisters. They still are much older. And as you know, older sisters don't want to have much to do with troublesome little brothers. Now, I might have been sick a lot, but I was also mischievous. Okay, I am. And so what happened is, a lot of times I played by myself, and I actually enjoyed a great deal of daydreaming. Later on, as I was studying more about different composers, I learned that Robert Schumann was such a person. He daydreamt a lot. And then it dawned on me, no wonder I relate so well with his music. I always daydreamt, and in Hong Kong, it's a tropical place. In the summer, by the way, Hong Kong always developed upward. It's so small. So we lived in an apartment. And so in the summer, there are actually flying ants all over the place. They're not troublesome. They just, fly. I played with them. We had outdoor furniture in our terrace, and they would land, and I would just use a pencil. I put the pencil tip on their wings. It didn't bother them. They just kept on walking, so they don't have wings. So I thought. Now, once in a while, I would accidentally ended up killing them. Not on purpose, but I was a mischievous little boy. So some of them died, and I remember saying to myself, wow, that's not so good. But then whenever that happens, this thought always happened. Take it easy. There are a jillion of these ants. What's the big deal? And then I had the debate with myself. It mattered to that ant. I really thought that. And then at the same time, I remember thinking, what did I do that made it die? Well, you can say, well, you crushed him or whatever. But no, I was thinking, what made something die? And at the same time, then I also asked, but what made it live to begin with? I had all those thoughts. Now, I never really articulated those. Don't forget, I don't usually express my feelings. And at the same time, I didn't really come to grips with the profundity of that, about what gave them life. I just remember thinking about those things. So that's the open heart situation. I did have the open heart surgery when I was 10. My parents, our Hong Kong doctor called them in and said, it's time. The surgery is now 99% successful. But there are only 2 teams like that in the world. One from England and one from the United States. It just so happens the British team was in Hong Kong. So I remember actually meeting them in some hotel. After that, I don't know why, I didn't ask my parents. They also didn't talk too much to me about that. We went to the United States one, the American one. You may have heard of Dr. Denton Cooley. And he is an unbelievable cardiologist. In those days, he was averaging, I heard, somewhere between 12 to 15 such open heart surgeries a day. And each one takes about an hour and a half, 2. So do some math. He didn't need to sleep much. Unbelievable talent. When he actually had, they would ask these potential surgeons, see how nimble they are, They make them tie a knot with a string, one-handed, inside a matchbox. And he said, which hand do you want? He did it both ways. So he mended my hole. When I went back to Hong Kong, they immediately saw I was much pinker, Now we need to fast forward, because at this pace we'll be here till Sunday. Fast forward. I'm now in my 20s, and I came down with a fever. I was actually in France, came down with some virus or something, came home, never really recovered from it. Had a very high fever, but then it left, but I had a low-grade fever for like a month, 2 months. And we saw quite a few doctors. Make a long story short, went to see a hematologist in the New York hospital. And they said they did all sorts of tests, from leukemia to whatnot. They said, you have spherocytosis. It's another fancy word. Spherocytes. Our blood cells usually are biconcave in shape. Those are the healthy ones. When you have sphere-like red cells, they are less malleable. So they're like this. And when they pass through your own spleen, your spleen kills them. So your spleen's killing your own blood cells. Now, when you're born with that, and you're still alive, your body compensated. Usually, spherocytes live for about 40 days. Normal red cells live for 120. So it could only mean my body was replenishing 3 times as much as someone who does not have spherocytosis, because I was still alive. And so he said, just take out the spleen and take out the gallbladder, because your heme part of your hemoglobin is now in your gallbladder. And so indeed they did, and now I don't have a spleen. And he said, when you're too young, without a spleen, it's not good. But I was in my early 20s, so it was fine. Actually, it's hereditary. 2 of our 3 daughters have spherocytosis. And we have 2 very young grandchildren, and the little boy has spherocytosis. It's not that big of a deal now, but it is something to be watching for. So now I have double whammy. In fact, the hematologist at the New York hospital said he had never seen a case where there is spherocytosis plus tetralogy of Fallot. I said, never? But we said, well, maybe they had, but they died. So now, speaking about that, I need to tell you, I'm going to jump around with the open heart surgery. Back in about 3-4 years later, I entered a competition in Salt Lake City. And in that competition, each competitor, you go through a tape session and so on. When they invite you, that means you went through that process. Each competitor is hosted by a host family. And my host family, he was a hand surgeon, and she was the head nurse. And so in talking with them, I told them about my tetralogy of Fallot and so on. They go, oh, really? Anyway, and I said, yeah, I had open heart surgery, Denton Cooley. The lady immediately sat up and said, what year was that? And I told her, she goes, oh my goodness. Because that was the year she and her husband were interns at the University of Virginia Hospital, and they witnessed 11 or 12 such surgeries, and they all died on the operating table. She said because Cooley's team had developed a heart-lung machine that takes over when they're doing the surgery. His machine, the body did not reject. Everybody else's teams, their bodies rejected. So during the rejection, the surgery, they died. So that's just a thing I learned much later about that. Now I'm back to my time as a child. At the same time, because I was sick a lot, I also don't express my feelings much. I'm really basically a very melancholy, withdrawn personality. You go, what? From what I know, you clown around, you play, you talk. Yes, I need a platform. See, tonight I have a platform. When I teach at Allegheny or Carnegie Mellon, there's a platform. So when there's a platform given, I'm okay. But you put me in a big crowded room, and I have to establish my platform, I really withdraw. That's just the way I am. But because of that, I really had not have too many opportunities to develop relationships. Okay? The key to this is about relationship. I didn't. But I had relationship with my music, which actually made it, for me, harder to figure out that I don't express, if you think about that. Because I did have an outlet. The music doesn't talk back to me. It already talked to me before I talked to others, you see. So the music speaks to me, I play, speak to you that way, and you come back. Seldom would you ever say things that would be internal with my life because you didn't hear that part. You heard the music. So I was kind of the messenger. That's actually usually what I want to do. It's really between the composer and the listener. I'm just the messenger. So throughout my life, it was very easy to continue to not have to express my feelings. But that, by the way, I found this out relatively recently. It's not like I knew. So this is a work in progress. It's very rewarding to know about it. It's hard work, and that's what it is. It is work. So let's go back and talk a little bit about my musical journey. Talked about the medical and psychological or whatever. Musically, as I told you, my two sisters, they both played the piano. And I remember, even today, I would imagine myself performing on the tabletop when my oldest sister would be practicing. And I still remember wanting to learn a certain piece. It is actually the Mozart A minor sonata. I still remember that, what she was playing. I loved it. But don't forget, I haven't started any lesson. I just heard it and I loved it. Did you hear me say I wanted to perform, not to practice? Big difference. Because I was imagining myself performing that Mozart. So imagine this, though. You are a gal in your mid-teens, and some ridiculous, sickish boy whom you love, he's your brother, he comes up. I told her how to do it. I was telling her, don't you want this to be more? And so I remember those distinct little things. So my parents saw that. They said, it's time to start the boy with piano lessons. So I did, and I was only 7, but it's not like I was 3 or anything. It was 7. And then we moved to the United States when I was 14 because there were Red Guards in Hong Kong making disturbances. Red Guards in those days, we didn't really know who they were. They were late teens, early 20s. We did not know if they were sent in by mainland China or not. And so the disturbance really was making a lot of people fearful. So friends of my parents said, why don't you fly to the United States and just wait there for a while until this settles down? Because both of my sisters by then were in college majoring in piano. So we did. We flew to the United States. And once we got here, other friends said, why don't you apply for permanent residency? So eventually we did, and I did become a U.S. citizen. Went to the Juilliard School and the pre-college and then the college. And you know that in any conservatory environment, especially a place like Juilliard, it's all about performance. It's all about competition. It's really focused. So I had a lot of opportunities to practice and play concerts and enter competitions. That was my life, okay? And as it continued, there was a question that I always asked myself after a competition or a concert. And that question was, now what? It would be like tonight, after tonight, I would ask myself, now what? But when you ask a question like that, it's very easy to answer that if you think about it. Duh. Get ready for the next concert, right? Prepare for the next competition. So I did. After a competition, now what? It had kept on, and it became haunting. Keep in mind, I don't express my feelings, right? So I had that in my inner struggle. Yeah, now what? It just didn't seem enough. Well, you get better and play with a better orchestra. I had that after I played with the Philadelphia Orchestra, for crying out loud, one of the best in the world. I remember, after Saratoga Spring, now what? So obviously, it was occupying in my mind quite a bit. I did not express it to anybody. I only really realized it after a concert or a competition. So repeated questioning became consuming a little bit. Now I'm at Allegheny teaching now, and I entered a competition in Spain. And again, you have a tape round, you go there, and you have host families. You don't stay with the host families, but they take care of you. Early on, words got back to me that a lot of people liked my playing, okay? And from the audience to the media to judges and so on. It really shouldn't have gotten back to me, but it did. And by the semifinals, it really became like a big thing, So at the end of the whole thing, I did not win first prize. I actually got fourth prize. I did get the audience prize and the best Spanish music prize. That was it, fine. But because of the success, the managers there got me tours to go back to Spain. So they did that. Now, because of the relationship with the host families, Spanish people, they are just so hospitable. They stop their world for you. So when you come back, it is actually rude to not tell them you're coming back. They will feel hurt. So I called them. Hey, Maria Luth, I'm coming on Thursday, I called her on a Tuesday. And she said, oh, good. Now you heard, right? And I said, yeah. Well, what I heard was 2 days prior to that Tuesday, Sunday, there was a plane crash in the Madrid airport. One was landing, one was taking off, boom. What's the word? Spontaneous combustion, 2 fireballs. No survivors. So here I'm flying into Madrid. Now Madrid in those days didn't have ground radar, and often Madrid is foggy, the airport. So I said, yeah, I know, I heard. She said, no, you don't know what happened. Well, let me tell you something else. The competition, there was, after the results were announced, there was a Russian judge. It was a panel of 12, 14 judges. A Russian judge, big guy. He came back with a very thick Russian accent to the backstage. Mr. Chen, we have done injustice to you. You should have placed higher. And then at the same time, I actually heard one of the Spanish judges was actually quoted in the newspaper saying I should have won. Now, when I said I heard, this gal said, no, you don't know. Do you know what happened? I said, yeah, the plane crash. She said, no. It killed Mark. Mark Reibenheimer was the first prize winner. He was returning for one of his tours. Now, here's where God used my pride. Let me explain. In those days, maybe even now, when people say I should have won, I believed them. You'll know how ridiculous that is because I have always managed to not listen to other competitors whenever I enter competition. Because if they're good, it makes me nervous. If they're bad or not so good, it gives me false hope. I never want to listen to anybody during that time, and I didn't, especially if they play pieces I was playing. So how can I, not having heard, believed I was the best? Doesn't make sense. I think when we're really consumed, there are many things that are obvious that don't make sense to us that we tend to want to believe, and that was one of them. So this plane crash, because it killed Mark, really drove home to me. That could have been me, that kind of thing. She said, no, there's something else. See, 2 weeks prior to that, and you can look it up in the newspaper, 2 weeks prior to that, there was an identical scenario of another plane crash in Madrid, one taking off, one landing, boom, no survivors. That crash killed Rosa, the Spanish judge. So now I'm flying into Madrid, and I was like, whew, you know. And I'm not a psychologist, and many people will tell you, psychologists, they will tell you if you are placed in a situation when you know death could be imminent, it is serious stress and trauma for that period of time. And then afterwards, it lingers. So I'm flying into the same place. And by the way, in those days, I had 11 concerts in 14 days. In those days, in different cities. If you fly from airport A to airport B, you have to go through Madrid. A, Madrid, B, Madrid, C. So I was like a yo-yo, right? And when I got there, first time, the founder and the president of the competition invited me to her house for lunch. And she said, do you mind that we make the concerts you're giving be memorial concerts for Mark and Rosa? And I was very touched, of course. So every place I went, it was like staring at me. I had no choice. I'm absolutely convinced God wanted me to deal with my own mortality. That's the way it is. And I was flying in, out of Madrid. So during that time, it is very memorable for me to say, you know, I've been asking this question, now what, now what? And now it is really, if you push this now what all the way through, it is to your own death. And then the question is, then what? And those were the questions I had. Now, music, that very thing that I could trustingly relate, had the potential to be taken away via my death. Now, here I'm going to look at my notes because husbands, listen to this, okay? When your wife tells you something, it's wise. So I'm just being wise to listen to something very wise. Let me quote to you what Brenda recently thought about. It just dawned on her about this. This is her talking. She said, I wonder if this ongoing, plaguing question was indeed traumatic for you in part because it was the very thing you had poured everything into, and you poured everything into the music because the relationship piece, which we are basically ultimately designed to have, was impaired. First, in part by your personality, and now in part by experience. So it was like you didn't have much else that is significant to you to be relationally speaking, helping. So, when the what next question came up in the music area, it was particularly jolting to think that there was nothing else, because you didn't really have too much else that way. The relationship part of your life you needed was almost solely with music. And that when that came up empty, it really brought a sense of panic and fear and emptiness. So, if you see her tonight, like wise lady, this is, It's very true. Learning to express your feelings, learning to deal with relationship. Here I need to take a sidebar and do a little advertisement. How many of you have heard of Fred Rogers? Maybe it's just because you're dark. I didn't see too many people raise it. Fred Rogers, remember Neighborhood, TV show, PBS? You don't have to date yourself to know. It's still on. Anyway, this is the 50th anniversary of his show. And you know he passed away in 2003, something like that, of cancer. I knew him. Not very well, I knew him. I know his wife more. She's a concert pianist. So, and I brought it to the Meadville Neighborhood Center Board, and they all wholeheartedly want to do this. Mark it down on your calendar. Friday, June 22nd, we're going to have a celebration of Fred Rogers with his wife coming to join us to talk about his message and his life, his mantra. But if you look back to some of the things, I looked at the trailer for this documentary that's coming out to celebrate it. It's just unbelievably poignant, and it's exactly what we all long to have, and that's relationship. He would tell children how to deal with difficult times, divorces. There was the assassination of Robert Kennedy, of Martin Luther King. He dealt with that right on the show with them. So that day, we're going to have a celebration of that message. He loved music. He actually played the piano. I might play something and maybe convince her to play some with me. But she's like 90, so I said, I can send someone down to drive you. Alec, I drive. So how do I continue communicating with you? Because, you know, I said, do you do emails? Whoa, that really insulted her. She goes, I text. Here's my number. Yeah, you're going to love her. She's so boisterous. Anyway, so that's something to celebrate about coming up. Anyway, coming back to this. The death or my mortality, the stress in it, I will now share the Vocalise by Rachmaninoff with you. It is very haunting. It is very touching. But I don't think it has a solution. So you will hear the Rachmaninoff Vocalise. So I'm now in Spain with that difficulty and never knew I needed to tell people about it. Not coincidentally, prior to my flight, I had met Brenda. We had not gotten married yet, but she was sharing with me her faith in Christ. I don't remember a thing she told me, even then. But she said, yeah, bring with you a Bible, just so you can read it and so on. And I did, you know. So when I was in Spain in a hotel, I really realized that I was at a very low point. Here's another mantra of mine. When you are in the lowest of pit, your only view is vertically upward. So up till then, I had never studied the Bible, knew very little about it, but I knew I needed to call on someone much bigger than me. So I cried out to Jesus, and I asked him to come into my life. Now, it was a spontaneous, immediate relationship. I didn't know much about, really, too much about God per se, but I knew there was a relationship. The eternal perspective came to light, and at the same time, I began to understand who I am. And later on, working through, with him working in my heart and life, I also began a work in progress to know why I am. It's too long to go into those things now, obviously. But if you want to, you can ask me and we can talk more about that. But what I do want to show you is this. When we have time to reflect, when we have time to look upward, look around, it often really helps if we are quiet. Then I learned just to be having a quiet environment does not calm a fidgety heart. I've done that. I've tried it. It was very quiet. I played pieces that were very quiet. I was fidgety as got out. But what really makes this, I know is real, is because the fidgetiness began to disappear in terms of not knowing, in terms of not having the ability to relate. Again, work in progress. It takes a long time, but I found that out. So now I'm going to share with you two very beautiful quiet nocturnes. Very gorgeous. Spend some time to reflect on what has been said so far and about yourself. And then I have much more to talk about when it comes to quiet time. Okay, first the Fauré Nocturne, and then the Chopin Nocturne. quiet time in childhood came back. Oh, it really never left. And I began to really learn from guidance from God, from other people, about the idea of learning to listen. And something else happened. You know, when I became a Christian, I knew God had to be number one. So the music became number two. Then I got married. Music is number three. Our oldest daughter was born. Music is number 4. Second daughter was born, music number 5. Yes, we have 3 daughters. Music fell to number 6. Now you say, what's wrong with that? You being just a good husband, good father, and so on. Sounds so noble, right? Well, one day it dawned on me. What's wrong with it was I was focusing on the music as it descended. Think about that. Oh yeah, it's number 3, number 4. I wasn't paying attention to who replaced it. I was focusing on it descending. So in a way, music had to die. Don't get me wrong, I'm obviously still playing. God was not taking the music away. It just was not going to be challenging him. Now, I think because of that, real mentoring was able to happen, because I was beginning then to listen to others. My involvement with the Meadville Neighborhood Center really gave me opportunities to come in contact with so many great causes. By the way, this place is not a bad place at all. Wonderful place, Meadville. Be proud of it. There's a lot of great things happening in the last 3, 5 years, 7 years. Wonderful causes. And as I learned to listen to them, I really learned to realize who I am. And I'm not someone who serves. I need to be a servant. What's the difference, you say? Well, let's say you got a job as a waitress or waiter at Perkins, and you work weekends, right? So you go there by 4 p.m. Friday, and you work, and you come home Sunday night. You're done working. You get to choose where you work. You get to choose where you serve. You get to choose whom you serve and when. Well, as a servant, you just are. And whatever you do, it needs to be in the heart of a servant. And that's what I see in this community. There are so many great, great servants. Just here tonight, if you look at the program, included on it talks about a little bit briefly, 211, the system of care, Peace for Crawford, the idea on ACE, adverse childhood experience. And there's actually another ACE, adverse community environment. So there are a pair of ACEs. I usually have literally playing cards, 2 aces, 2 ace of hearts, to give, I forgot, to give a, what's the word, visual aid. And did you catch my phrase, my choice of suit, ace of heart? That too would have been intentional. As you go out, you're going to see a lot of vendors. If you are hurting tonight, if you feel your life is not worth living, if you have had a horrific background, if you're struggling, if you know people such as that, please hang on to this message from tonight of relationship and to share that with others. And you know, when we start to listen and be for each other, it really enriches all of us. I just want to, obviously I'll end with the 2 selections from Hand of Messiah. By the way, when I play the Hallelujah, there's this custom or tradition that some people feel they need to stand, and some don't know that, so some are standing, some are not. It's very awkward. Don't stand. I don't intend to stand. It would have been hard. But really, this is my one sentence. I want to read it from myself. Give all of us a meaningful chance in search of the temporal and the eternal. So it's a good ending to bring to you, unto us a child is born. Obviously, the Messiah is about Jesus. And I know some of you are not with that, and that's fine. But listen to the unto us a child is born. There are many different lines that I've transcribed for piano. Many different lines, and some of them are very opposing to each other. So that too is a great sample of harmonious artwork entity in the midst of opposing views. It really can work together. And of course, the Hallelujah chorus is very well known and exciting. Listen to that as well. There are lines opposing each other that work well together. So I want to thank you for coming, and we'll end with the Messiah.